Hey everyone, welcome back to the Chessyard. This is Dhairya Bagga, and I'll be showing you one of the games today where I played the Karo Kann Defense and the game turned into the advanced variation. Now, Caro Kann is a very solid opening for black. It starts off with pawn c6 followed by d5, and it's generally very good for black. You need to again try and control these lines because it's important to handle the game in a better way here. Otherwise, it can go haywire for you. I recommend watching you one of my previous videos on the Karo Kann defense where I explained the lines of Karo Kann in a very good way. I hope that's helpful. If you haven't watched it yet, I'm placing the link in the description below. So yeah, let's start off with this game for now. White starts off with pawn e4. I responded with say c6 here. Now he goes for d4, going for the center immediately. As you will see if you play the Karo Kann against many opponents. So these lines are something which you should be familiar with. Then I go for d5. Now the game has become the Caro Kann defense. Now here, white has actually got two options which they generally prefer. Either they can capture. If they capture, it becomes the exchange variation. If they move it forward, it becomes the advanced variation because the pawn is advanced here and didn't go for the exchange. Because if he captures the pawn on d5, I capture with my c6 to d5 and it becomes the exchange variation, but here he decided to move it forward, trying to make sure the situation is controlled from his end. There's no exchange happening immediately. So I developed my bishop on f5. Generally, you will see moves like e6 is required here so that this pawn doesn't move forward. But if I don't develop my light square bishop first, then it blocks the way of the bishop. So then I cannot develop my bishop. So I have to wait for e6 here rather than first move bishop to f5. Now he moves bishop to d3, offering exchange, which I denied because the idea is if I capture it here, his queen can quickly pop up. It's developed already. Then after I stop the pawn moving forward, he can actually go for knight development after one of my other pieces developments here. Suppose he can go for castle, and now here white is already in advanced in the game. His pieces are developed on the king side. Castling is done, so king is on a safer place right away. His queen is also in the action already, and now he can start developing and attacking from the queen side. Whereas the king for black is still in the center. The king is can I don't think can we move to safety by castling any soon. So is the queen side. The pawns are also very much on their same place. The white pawns are also advanced in the center. They can definitely turn into pass pawns anytime after some exchanges happen. So yeah, this kind of a game is something which I don't prefer playing. So rather, I moved my bishop back here to g6 with the idea that if he now captures, the h file gets opened, and that will be very helpful in the game throughout for black. So let's get back to the game again. I moved my bishop to g6 here, and then white develops his knight on f3. Some basic moves from white. He wants to castle as soon as possible now. I moved pawn to e6 now, offering him the bishop exchange still that you can go ahead for the capture, which he won't because he don't want to open up the h file again. So he thought of now breaking the center or maybe even advancing this pawn further to make sure my development of the bishop doesn't happen in a good square, good active square. So I thought of capturing it first, not because if he moves forward, it becomes a bit tricky to handle the situation. So I captured. He takes back with the bishop. I develop my bishop on b4 here. He gets his knight in between. Um, and then I went with knight to d7 with the idea that in the next move it can go to b6 and kick away this bishop from the c4. He castles. I move my knight to b6. He pushes his bishop back to b3 here. Now b3 is a okay square for him, but I actually he should have gone to uh, E2 as computer suggesting. If he goes back to E2, the only problem I see is he cannot get his rook here. The rook will be inactive on the E1 as well, where generally rook resides in such kind of games, attacking the center always. So he didn't want to take it back to uh, E2 here, if I'm not mistaken. So he takes it back rather to uh, B3 here. Then I develop my knight on E7. He tries to push away my bishop from here. Now, if I take it back, the threat was that he can take back his bishop one step further and push his pawn to b4, threatening my bishop. So, for that, to make sure that I'm prepared for that, I need to move away my knight and make some retrieval squares active for bishop. But in that process, I would be just playing with my bishop, not developing anything else. So I thought of capturing it, capturing the knight immediately. He captures back with c3, and so I got my knight on d5 here. The idea of threatening the pawn on c3. Also, it's a center controlling square, so I can hop into multiple squares whenever required in the game. So good controlling square for black. He develops his bishop on b2 now, this long diagonal, which can only be effective in one way if he breaks the center now, so that his bishop can be very helpful in the endgame. So since I know now he will try to break the C and the center and the C and D files, so I thought of getting the rook on C8, which is a good square for when you're playing for black. Always try to get your rook on the C8, queen on C7. That's the places these two pieces resides in such kind of games, especially in Sicilian. Queens lie on C7. In Caro Kann, not generally because not in Karo Kann advanced because the pawn is blocking the queen diagonal if it comes to c7. Here he also moves his rook to c1, just a repercussive move here, trying to make sure the rooks are in front of each other. I moved pawn a5 here. It is a passive move in such kind of a middle game, but here I wanted to make sure that I am aware of what my opponent is playing. I wasn't sure what if he captures on the knight or if he moves the pawn forward, or he will try to take his queen to d2 and then try to attack on the king side. So I wasn't aware of his plans, so I thought of waiting a bit more. So I moved the pawn a5. Now he takes back his knight on d2. Now definitely the next move should be c4 from him, trying to make sure that my pieces are my knight is kicked away from here. Then he can move to c5 as well. The other knight has to move there. So yeah, my knight should be just running away from the pawn. So I first thought of kicking away this bishop from b3 by moving my pawn a4. So now he keeps his bishop back on a2. Still, the next move very much possible is c4 from his side. So I first moved c5 here so that I can go for capture if possible, or I'm offering him a capture as well. The c file gets opened. My rook is in a good place. Now here he does a mistake by moving f4. He didn't see the threat coming. He actually wanted to close this diagonal for the bishop, which is very tricky for him in the future. Also, my bishop is and this f file once opened, his queen can come on the f file and attack on the king side f7 square because my king hasn't castled yet. So yeah, his plan was okay, but he missed that his rook is not on the e1 here and controlling the e3 square. So I hopped in and forked the queen and the rook here, and then I capture the rook. He takes back with his knight, and then I moved pawn to c4. Now the idea behind c4 was I am just closing this bishop diagonal forever. If he has to break, he has to move pawn d5 next, and then again I can capture with the knight. So breaking the center will be tough after I move pawn to c4. He takes his knight back onto e3. He is now trying to make sure that there are like three attackers on this pawn, and there are only two defenders for now. So he wants to break this c file open so that he can get something going for him. Here I moved bishop to d3, making sure that there's the third defender on the pawn as well. A very nice square for the bishop to be always trying to make sure the pieces here are restricted. And this is a very tough piece to be moved from here. The knight will also take a couple of moves to attack this. The bishop can come here and go for the exchange, but that is not happening anytime soon. He moved queen to g4 here with the idea of attacking the g7 pawn. So I moved it by one step, moving it to g6. He tried to then push his pawn forward from the h file. Now, generally, I won't recommend you moving the h pawns until unless you are pretty sure with your attack, because it creates a lot of weaknesses around the king side. The king was castled to a safety, and you have just broken the safety part here by moving your pawns on the king side forward. This is very bad for white here. Even if you are playing as black, do not move your king side pawn immediately if you have castled. Then went for the knight exchange here, so that even if he captures, my queen gets to an active square. If he doesn't capture, I will capture and then go to the d5 and attack the king side here. He goes for the capture. I take back with my queen. He moves rook here to d1. Again, if he now, so again he's trying to play a good tactic here. So if I miss this move somehow, suppose I move my queen to um, c6 here, he has an option to actually, no, from not from c6 here. I need to actually move something else. Suppose I move this. The idea was this bishop is spinning on the queen, so he can go for the capture. Then I cannot go for the capture back. So my game is now completely turned. He can start attacking from the king side now. So the game changes if I miss a move here, because of the pin happening on the queen. So here I moved my queen to e4 rather, trying to make sure the bishop is also protected. There's no pin of the bishop as well. Then he moved pawn to h5. He's trying to break the situation, which is even worse for him, because once he breaks, the rook comes on the g8, attacking the king, and that will be very tough to control. So I understood that, and I captured the pawn on h5. He captures back with his queen. I move my rook on g8 here. It's a checkmate in one if he doesn't save it. So he protects with the rook by moving it to d2 here. And here I gave him a check by moving my queen to e1. He moves away his king on h2, the only square remaining for the king. And then I captured the rook. And here my opponent resigned because, again, he has a queen, but it's on an inactive square. There's a mate threat already on the g2. If he saves it by moving his queen to say f3, which computer suggesting, then the bishop is hanging here. So lots of weaknesses on his side, less number of pieces. Position is bad, pieces are down, so you cannot win a game from here. So yeah, he resigned. A good game. And there are a couple of highlights if you observed here. One, when you play the advanced variation as white, so white played the advanced variation by moving the pawn forward. You have to first develop your bishop, which was very helpful in this game. If he would have captured the bishop, then also h file gets open. It will be a very good line. The rook lies on c8. From the queen side. So this is also another crucial point here to be observed. This pawn movement forward rather than going for the exchange here is also very critical. As I blocked the diagonal of the bishop here, the bishop remained inactive for most part of the game. So a lot of things happening, something which you can try and implement in your games if you don't so far. If you have some better tactics to play the Karo Kann Defense advanced variation, please do share your games with me. I'll just love to learn from your experience as well. I hope you like the video. Please do share, comment, and subscribe the channel. I see you next time. Yeah. Take care. Bye bye.